I.F.O. by Conway Fitzgerald. Chapter 2. Daylight crept through the windows of Agent McVale's third-story apartment, signaling that it was mid-afternoon in Washington. He was still asleep, sprawled lifelessly on the carpet between the bed and the bathroom. An empty bottle of Jack Daniels lay alongside his head. Red rose petals were scattered about the room, with the plastic-wrapped bundle of thorns resting in the far corner. The television lay in pieces below a gaping hole in the wall. Shattered glass and blood adorned the bathroom, with a trail leading back to McVale's fist. It was wrapped like a stump in the bedsheet around him. The phone rang once, and then again, and again, until he finally woke up. As he lifted himself off the ground, the pain in his head forced him to stop and wince. Then he felt the pain in his hand and cried out. The phone kept ringing, torturing his eardrums until he lifted the phone from the receiver.
Diane, baby, let's talk. I want to talk about this,
he said, his eyes forced shut by the pain in his head.
McVale,
said a low voice. It was not the voice of his estranged wife, whom he was hoping would call. It was someone from the bureau.
This is McVale,
he said with a sigh, quite sorry now that he answered the phone.
Ian, it's Schultz. Is everything all right?
Yes, Commander. I'm fine. Just having a little afternoon nap,
he replied slowly, trying to collect himself.
Good. I need you to come down to headquarters right away. Something's come up and I need you for it.
Listen, Dick. I just got back in, and I was promised at least a few days.
His anger returned.
Ian, I'm not asking you. I'm ordering you. Report to my office at 1500 hours and be prepared to dispatch immediately. Schultz out.
The receiver clicked and spat out a dial tone before McVale could utter another word.
Fuck!
He yelled, hurling the receiver towards the rest of the bedroom's wreckage. His return home from his previous mission didn't go as planned. The strain on his relationship had become unbearable for his wife of 10 years. Being an FBI agent meant weeks away without notice, and many days when he was not permitted to even call her. Though charmed with the man enough to marry him, Diane could not hold on to someone who just wasn't there. When Ian arrived home with flowers in hand, he was hoping to finally mend some of the wounds they had suffered, but it was too late. She had already left. She had taken just about everything, even the dog. No note, no Dear John letter, not even a phone message awaited him at home. Her new cellular phone line was disconnected, and her mother wasn't telling him anything. All that was left in the apartment, his home, was now just a pile of scattered scraps of rubble, broken dreams and what-ifs, and a broken man on the floor. Schultz had only given him about 40 minutes to make the trip down to the Bureau headquarters, which was at least an hour away. With all hopes of a happy homecoming vacation gone, he really didn't have an excuse not to go, although he did play with the idea of calling Schultz back and telling him to go to hell. But the phone was destroyed, and he really didn't want to stay in that apartment another waking minute. So Ian cleaned himself up, bandaged his knuckle, and got out of there. About an hour later, he had reached the building he was ordered to report to, Central FBI Headquarters, Washington, D.C. After fighting through Georgetown traffic, he drove at an almost suicidal pace for K Street, all the while trying to piece together words that might somehow express what he could never convey to his wife during their 10 years of turbulent marriage. He loved her. He needed her. She was his whole life. Without her, he wanted to die. McVale parked in a shady spot in the west side of the parking lot, far from the nearest available space. After parking, he turned off the ignition and sat motionless. He stared at himself in the rear-view mirror, and he didn't like what he saw. His devotion to his career had ruined his life. He had married once before and had a son. His son grew up to be an artist and a homosexual, which resulted in their total estrangement. The first wife soon followed. Meeting Diane seemed like a miracle, a second chance at life. She was a beautiful, strong, independent woman who understood him and his duties and loved him dearly, or so he thought. But now, her departure from his life equated to total failure. She was all he had that was good. All that remained was the horrible world in which he found himself in, alone once again. He reached down for the pistol in his holster. As he withdrew it, his heartbeat picked up drastically. He considered what might be said when they found the bloody mess. He wondered how he might be remembered, if at all. Who would attend his funeral? Would his entire life have really mattered at all? As significant moments of his life flashed in his mind like a kaleidoscope, he pointed the barrel of the gun towards his face. Just then, as he breathed in what would be his last breath, he opened his eyes and noticed a man approaching the car. The man was a fellow agent, a friend, if co-workers really count. The man patted his open hand on the driver's side window.
Okay, what's going on in here?
He asked innocently. It gave McVale a moment to hide the gun. He then rolled down the automatic window.
So McVale, you're back. At the Capitol. Howdy, Charles. Yep, I'm back. Better than ever,
he said, with a half smile, trying to play off his feelings of total despair.
I thought this was your car. We don't get to see much of you anymore, since you were dispatched to the field. So I thought I'd come by and say hi.
Agent Charles noticed McVale's attention wasn't entirely on him. His distant stare told of his lack of interest in the conversation.
Well, I guess I'll see you around. Yep,
said McVale.
See you around.
Agent Charles waved as he headed towards his car. Ian's emotions could no longer be contained. He cried like a child. He let out tears he had held within for many years. The trauma of lost love, friends and family, and broken dreams were all realized in a deluge of tears. The car's clock reminded him that he was very late for his appointment with the bureau chief. He reburied the pain of his life and decided to put the pistol away. He then entered the building. Upon arriving at Schultz's office, the secretary immediately motioned for him to go inside.
They're waiting for you,
she said, putting the receiver of her phone on her shoulder.
They're waiting? Oh boy, what have I done now?
The receptionist smiled and started back into her previous call.
Thanks, Lou.
He opened the door to Schultz's office. Inside, seated in the chairs in front of his desk, were two men. One was Air Force brass. The other had the look of a civilian.
Ah, McVale. Come in, please.
The two men stood up as he entered.
Agent McVale, I would like for you to meet Colonel Erickson from the Air Force.
The colonel reached out his hand for a shake, but McVale offered his left, motioning to the bandage on his right hand.
And this is Max Brady, who is a senior representative from the Federal Aviation Administration.
Nice to meet you,
said Ian. Brady was satisfied with a nod and a smile.
So what can I do for you fellas? Are you, missing an airplane or something?
The Air Force colonel responded without expression.
The nature of our inquiry is classified. When we have clearance that you have accepted the assignment, we will brief you on the necessary details.
At that moment, Schultz handed Ian the standard FBI clearance waivers across the table. Though he had signed many similar interdepartmental clearances and accepted many missions without any prior knowledge, this one already seemed peculiar.
What's this all about, Dick?
Schultz could tell that Ian was not his normal self. But even under duress, he was still the best man for the job.
Just sign it and we'll tell you,
he said, the emphasis on sign made it clear that he fully expected him to comply. Ian forced a smile and then scrawled his name upon the sheet of paper, using his bulky, bandaged hand. By now, he was more curious than afraid of the nature of this assignment. The two began their presentation immediately. They pulled out some radar screen captures, photos, and maps from a manila folder marked Classified. The Air Force colonel spoke first.
6 months ago, we detected a series of radar anomalies vectoring from the southwest United States. We've been tracking the area of interest here.
He pointed to what looked like northern New Mexico. A series of red lines all seemed to point to an area near the Rio Grande.
We have since made several more confirmations. To date, we have recorded over 17 independent violations of United States aerospace.
There have been no flights on record authorized to or from the area in question,
the other man interjected.
In addition, the vehicles tracked appear to be able to achieve...
He hesitated to find the right word.
Unearthly speeds. We have estimates that one vehicle traveled over 60,000 miles per hour, with course-correcting changes in direction without loss of velocity. In addition, it appears on several occasions these vehicles have entered and exited the Earth's atmosphere.
Ian raised his right eyebrow in disbelief. Once again the colonel spoke, this time handing McVale a photograph with an infrared composite.
This is the only photographic evidence that we have.
He lifted the photo up for McVale to see and pointed to what looked to him like a blur within another blur.
It is a still image taken from a photo shot by a local resident. It was obtained through the media, which highlights the sensitivity of this mission and the need for total discretion. As you can see, it is a cylindrical disc about 30 meters in diameter. There are no markings or distinguishable characteristics. However, the heat emissions consistent with an aircraft are practically non-existent, suggesting it is not propelled by a combustion engine or using any kind of conventional thrust.
Ian couldn't hide his smile, but remained silent. The FAA man spoke again.
Recently, a few commercial pilots have claimed to have made visual contact with strange aerial phenomenon matching this description, adding to a growing media interest in the area. Therefore, we'd like to emphasize the need for a discreet investigation to determine the origin and/or destination of these vehicles. We've included all of the best, latest information on the trajectories of the vehicles and relevant facts of the case in your file.
With that, they stopped, and all three men looked over to Agent McVale. He chuckled, glancing down at the photos and other documents in the file.
So let me get this straight. You guys want me to go down to New Mexico and find you some little green men?
If that is the origin of these anomalies, yes,
answered the colonel, his blank expression remaining constant behind the thick, black-framed glasses.
I thought you guys said there were no UFOs.
He responded, tossing the file on Schultz's desk. Schultz displayed his impatience with McVale's flippant attitude.
Agent McVale,
he said in a distant, professional tone.
This is very serious. This is a matter of national security. The NSA and the Joint Chiefs have already been apprised. If these vehicles do exist and are based within the United States without our knowledge, we could have several manned or unmanned killing machines in the hands of terrorists planning the next 9/11. Until these airplanes or discs or whatever they are identified, they aren't to be considered UFOs. They're to be considered potential weapons of mass destruction. They are to be considered a threat to the United States of America. We need you to investigate leads on the ground, obtain necessary information to identify them and report back to this office ASAP. Is that understood?
McVale corrected his seat posture and removed his wry smile.
Yes, sir. Good. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming down here. I'll have Agent McVale report within the week.
Everyone stood up. The officers nodded and left. As McVale headed for the door, Schultz stopped him.
Ian,
He said firmly.
have a seat.
McVale stopped and turned slowly.
And close the door, please.
McVale did, and then sat down as ordered. Schultz continued to look down to his desk, reading the file as he spoke.
Is there something you want to tell me, sir?
Answered McVale innocently. Schultz looked up at him.
Something affecting you personally, perhaps, that I should be aware of?
McVale opened his mouth, but no words came out.
Because if there is, I'll find out sooner or later.
He looked into McVale's eyes and peered directly into his soul. The director's incredible powers of discovery and investigation, which propelled his career, were in full force.
I'd prefer sooner than later.
Agent McVale was silent. He felt ashamed for being so weak. Even if he had lost everything else, he still had his career, and it appeared his boss and the Bureau still cared. But he was too embarrassed to reveal the truth about Diane, and too frightened to express his anguish about it.
You're a good man, McVale. I feel as though I can really count on you to do these types of innocuous missions, as well as those which might be very dangerous. The point is, they're extremely sensitive, or they wouldn't be our business.
Dick, I'm sorry about the little green men thing. I just had a long night, and I'm still a little hungover.
Is everything all right at home? You said something when you answered the phone, which makes me feel as though there might be more pressing matters that require your attention.
Just a little argument, sir. I'm sure by tomorrow.
And I suppose you just fell on your hand.
Once again, McVale had no response.
I know what the Bureau can do to a relationship, Ian. I've often had feelings of remorse for my family, and felt as though perhaps I haven't been a good enough father to my boys. But I take comfort in the fact that our work can directly influence the safety of millions of Americans. Someone's got to be there to nab the bad guys. Just like when brave men and women give their lives in the field of battle, so too do our personal lives perish under the strain of the Bureau. But just don't let those feelings get in the way of good decision-making and your duty.
I'll remember that, sir.
Good. And have our physicians rebandage that hand. Luann has your travel itinerary waiting outside. Call into my office right away if you see anything unusual or you think you may need backup.
Yes, sir.
With that, Ian left and returned to his car. It was only now that he really got the sensation that Agent Charles had saved his life. He reholstered his gun and headed straight for the airport. He felt refreshed, as though he was leaving his own funeral and had paid his last respects to the life he could never have. What Schultz said rang true, and now all he wanted was to complete the mission, no matter how absurd it was. His instincts as an investigator took over. He wanted to find the answer to this latest riddle more than he wanted to be a man with a wife and child. He wanted only to be what he truly was, Agent McVale, FBI.
Thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so you never miss an episode. Be sure to smash that like button and comment below. It helps a lot. If you'd like to help me get this book published, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. And as always, be sure to share this story with all of your friends on your favorite social media.